Broncos country, welcome back to another video, and I am here with my first mock draft of the season. In today's video, of course, we're going to do a 7-round Denver Broncos mock draft, and yeah, I feel like this is kind of a good time. There's a lot of panic, a lot of overreaction from Broncos fans, just based on this initial start to the season, and so I just kind of wanted to go through a mock draft and see what could happen come April. Of course, draft stocks are going to rise and fall, so players are going to constantly change where they're being drafted, as well as I'm displaying stats, but don't take the stats as a telltale sign of how to judge a player and how to evaluate a player. They're just easy to show graphically. And then second thing is I wanted to ask you guys, how often do you want me to do these mock drafts? I was thinking every 2 weeks. That way it gives the Broncos a little bit of time and the draft position changes, as well as players are going to rise and fall a decent amount throughout the weeks. But if you guys want this weekly, let me know in the comment section below, as well as leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as the support is greatly appreciated. Currently, as I'm recording this, we are 1 subscriber away from 600. So if you could help me to reach that milestone, that would mean the absolute world to me. With that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump straight in to my first 2026 Denver Broncos mock draft. So starting out with pick 20, I'm going with Sonny Styles, linebacker out of Ohio State. There's a couple of guys here that you could choose at the linebacker position. Obviously, Sonny Styles is one of them. Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas is another guy, and CJ Allen from Georgia is another one. Now, I do want to clarify, I've done a little bit of research and studying these prospects, but I still have a long ways to go, so I'm not going to go super in-depth about these guys. I'm going to talk about how they fit into the Broncos roster. But here I was deciding between a linebacker. Sonny Styles is my favorite out of all 3 that I mentioned at this point, specifically for the Broncos, and I was deciding between Kenyon Sadiq, the Oregon tight end. But I went here because I think Sonny Styles adds a tremendous amount of value to the Denver Broncos. The first thing is he is a former safety converted to linebacker, and he has a great coverage ability, which I really think we're missing at our linebacker position, which you guys obviously all saw on Sunday against the Colts. Just Alex Singleton and Justin Strnad were not cutting it. We need Dre Greenlaw back. So adding Sonny Styles to play next to Dre Greenlaw, I think will make a big impact. Of course, like I mentioned, former safety, going to have those coverage skills. I think he's a solid all-around player. So, yeah, in 4 seasons with Ohio State, he played 2 as a linebacker and 2 as a safety. Of course, this current year, and last year is when he converted to linebacker. So you can see what he's done at the linebacker position as well as being a safety, and he is pretty solid. Instantly, from me, I think he would plug in as that linebacker number 2, right? Dre Greenlaw is going to be your starter. Then you're going to have Sonny Styles. Alex Singleton and Justin Strnad both are on expiring deals. So then who do you have after that? Well, you got Karene Reed, and you got, of course, you got Garrett Wallow. You got Lavelle Bailey, who I would like to see on the roster next year. So to me, I think he would instantly be the linebacker 2 for the Denver Broncos, providing a solid coverage guy to help out in covering tight ends or covering even running backs, as we saw on Sunday versus the Colts. So Sonny Styles would immediately be an impact player for the Denver Broncos, slotting in as our number 2 linebacker. Then in the second round, I'm going with Jake Slaughter, the center out of Florida, and maybe this is a little bit of a projection. I don't think he's really projected this high right now, but I like Slaughter out of Florida, and you can see by the asterisk next to Luke Wattenberg's name, he is going to be a free agent after this season. So to me, I think we want to get on that train, and we want to get a guy who we trust at center. Of course, you have free agency to address that, get a veteran if you want, but adding a guy like Slaughter, a young guy adding to our line, making ourselves a younger team, I like that because the other guys on the team, Alex Forsythe, maybe Nick Gargiulo, I don't know, Calvin Throckmorton, probably not. He's more of a guard tackle anyway. But to me, Jake Slaughter, I want to address the center position. We could obviously bring back Luke Wattenberg. That is a very real possibility. But there are a couple of centers who I like here in this draft. Of course, Slaughter being one of them. Parker Brails, forward out of Alabama, being another. And then Logan Jones, I believe it is, out of Iowa. Those are kind of the 3 guys that I'm eyeing right now. But here at pick 52, I do go ahead and grab Jake Slaughter, the center. Oh my goodness. the Florida center. I kind of was mixing that up there. Then in the third round, this is a guy who maybe you don't think should be here. He was here in the third round for me, and it is Eli Stowers, the tight end out of Alabama. Now, he is a former quarterback, right? Played first at Texas A&M. He played both tight end and quarterback. Then I believe he was a quarterback at New Mexico State before transferring to Vanderbilt to play as a tight end. So he's kind of got this pedigree of being a quarterback, lining up as a tight end. He's even taken some snaps in the backfield, or I don't know if it's been the backfield, but he has been utilized as a rusher for Vanderbilt as well. So he's kind of lined up all around the field, and this term gets thrown out way too much by Broncos fans, but he does kind of remind me of this Joker role that Sean Payton was talking about someone who can line up anywhere and be a mismatch. To me, Eli Stowers has the potential to be that, especially after the end of this season. Evan Ingram's going to have 1 year left on his deal, and you could absolutely extend him beyond this season. But guys after Evan Ingram on this roster, right? I guess let's look at what Stowers has done. You can see that on the screen. He's been an effective pass catcher, and this isn't showing his rushing stats either, or even his stats as a quarterback. But we look at the current roster. Evan Ingram's going to have 1 year left on his deal after the season. Could absolutely extend him, as I mentioned, but Troutman has an expiring deal. Nate Atkins has an expiring deal, and Lucas Krull has an expiring deal, right? I would assume maybe you bring back Troutman and Atkins. Maybe you go after another guy in free agency. Who knows? But with the time it takes for a tight end to develop, as long as they're not Brock Bowers or Sam Laporta, there's very few guys who will come in, make an instant impact at the tight end position straight out of college, in my opinion. Give Stowers a year to develop behind Evan Ingram, who is a receiving threat. And then if you bring back Evan Ingram, great. You got a nice 1-2 punch at tight end. If you don't, then he has the ability to take over. And I was kind of saying this a lot last year with some of the other tight ends. But yeah, I like Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt here in the third round. Then in the fourth round, with one of our 2 fourth-round picks, I have selecting Gracen Halton, the defensive lineman out of Oklahoma. You can see his stats on screen, a 4-year player at the University of Oklahoma, 37 total games played with 11 tackles for loss and 5 sacks in that time period. But you look at the guys right now in the starting rotation. You got Zach Allen and DJ Jones. You locked those guys up this offseason, but that unfortunately probably means that John Franklin Myers is going to be headed out the door. As unfortunate as that is, I would like him to stay. It probably means that Malcolm Roach is going to be headed out the door. As unfortunate as it is that to say that, you got Savion Jones, a young guy, but I think you need to add to the depth here, because once John Franklin Myers is gone, I would expect Savion Jones to take his place, but he's been a healthy scratch for the first 2 weeks this season, so he's still developing. Malcolm Roach is on IR, so you'd have Gracen Halton jump in as kind of this depth guy, but you can never have too much line depth both on the offensive line and the defensive line. So I think adding a guy when you're going to be losing multiple key players on the defense is not a bad thing. So Gracen Halton is our first fourth-round pick. And our second fourth-round pick is another trench guy. I was just talking about it. I don't think you can have too much depth at the offense and defensive line. I'm going with Ernest Greene III out of Georgia, a left tackle for the Georgia Bulldogs. And this guy he's a high upside guy from what I can tell. Again, haven't done a whole lot of research and still need to do research, but he got Garrett Bowles, who is aging. Hopefully he's got a little bit longer left, but we don't know, so maybe try and draft and develop a guy for the future, and who knows, he might work out, he might not. But I would like to look towards the future and maybe get that insurance plan in place to go get Bo Nix a blindside protector of the future after Garrett Bowles is done, which hopefully isn't for a while. But then you got McGlinchey, you got Palczewski, who's on an expiring deal, you got Matt Parrott, you got Frank Crum, but to me, outside of Palczewski, don't love the other depth tackles that we got, so I'd like to look at a potential future guy. And Ernest Greene could slide around. He could play left, could play right, but he played left tackle in college, which is where I would be looking, because obviously Garrett Bowles, he was an older prospect when we drafted him. Who knows how long he's got left? Again, like I said, I hope it's for a while, but having that insurance plan in place is never a bad thing, especially taking a shot at a guy who can sit and develop and doesn't have to be thrown to the wolves right away. Then moving on to the 5th round, I'm grabbing some more safety depth with Tao Johnson, and purely here is when I started to go best player available, because the best teams build through the draft and they take the best players, right? So Tao Johnson, safety out of Utah here, adding to the depth of the Broncos safety room, right? I think there can be a little bit more depth added. Right, you got Brandon Jones, Talanoa Hufanga, PJ Locke is on an expiring contract, so it'll be interesting to see if we bring him back. JL Skinner is someone who I really like. Tao Johnson would kind of fit in here as a depth developmental guy. But then you got other guys like Delaren Turner-Yale on the practice squad, who I believe will be on or whose contract is going to expire, especially since he's on the practice squad now. And then you got Devin Key, some other guys in there. I'd like to add another safety to this room, and Tao Johnson does just that. Then moving on to the 7th round, this is purely a shot in the dark. I'm going with Jalon Daniels, the quarterback out of Kansas, right? It's a 7th round pick. You're taking a shot, you're throwing a dart, and you don't know what you're gonna hit with. You could go out absolutely go another position, but Jalon Daniels would be a backup quarterback for the Broncos, right? And a guy who you're hoping to develop, because he has played 6 seasons with the University of Kansas and is only 22 years old at the time of recording this video. So he's got the college experience and just someone who you could develop as a future backup quarterback. And then if not, it's a 7th round pick. So if you cut him, you cut him, right? But yeah, that's my mock draft. Of course, I think he would be the 4th quarterback. Maybe you could argue 3rd quarterback, right? What's going to happen with Sam Ehlinger? Are you going to bring him back after the season? But I do think that Stidham would still be the backup even if you take Sam Ehlinger right out of the equation. I think he would be number 3. So it's still Nix and Stidham as obviously your starter with Nix, backup with Stidham, and then you don't have to have a 3rd quarterback, but I think Sean Payton, especially with the new rule of having that emergency 3rd quarterback, why not get a young guy who you could keep on your roster or you could stash on the practice squad in case of emergencies? But yeah, that's my first mock draft for the 2026 NFL Draft for the Denver Broncos. Let me know what your thoughts are on the mock draft in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel down below if you did enjoy this video. And as always, the support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Parker, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.